Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another session of our Career Talks with Grad Australia. So my name's Emily, and I'm going to be your host for today. So before we start today's session, I'd just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect the meaning of place, and by doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge the elders, past and present, of all the land we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I am joining the call from Brisbane, which is the traditional land of the Turrbal people. So just to introduce myself, my name is Emily, and I'm one of the webinar hosts for the Grad Australia Career Talk sessions. This is one of our Career Talk sessions, and what we're going to be doing today is going through career pathways with a science or environmental degree. And for those of you who don't know what Grad Australia is, so it's a graduate career site where you can explore and get to know graduate employers. You can get a backstage pass to see what it is like working in a role at their organizations. You can also apply for their programs that are well suited to you. So if you guys are interested, you can also visit gradaustralia.com.au. You can set up your account and then also get notified of open roles and other opportunities that you can apply for. So today we have a very amazing guest who's joining us. He has a bunch of experience and valuable insights in this area. So we've got Garry here, and he is the team leader of employment programs from Department of Environment, Land and Water and Planning. So I would just like to pass it over to Garry so he can just give a little bit of an introduction about himself. So Garry, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yes, Garry Stock. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners, and I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I've been lucky enough to have a career in government for over 50 years. I'm just about to retire. I have been working with grad programs for the last 20 years and have thrived and love it so much. And probably because of the passion of the people, particularly in the environmental area. The grads that we have attracted, developed and maintained have been fantastic advocates for Victoria and government, and really proud to have been part of that process.
Awesome. Thanks, Garry. So today, guys, we're going to be going through a bunch of questions that we've prepared. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the comments. This is definitely the time for you to ask Garry any questions that you have, anything. And also, please introduce yourself so we can learn about who's watching the video as well. So the first question that we have today is, what can you do with a science or environmental degree?
I actually think you can do anything. As an employer, maybe I'll go back a step and say we currently have a couple of specific graduate programs that we recruit graduates to in the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. One is our Science and Planning graduate program, and the other is the whole of Victorian Government graduate program. And for our Science and Planning graduate program, those applications will be open. In fact, opened a couple of days ago and will be open until about the 8th of August. So our website will have those that information for you. What you can do with a career, it's interesting because for employers, many employers will turn around and say, a degree is something that can guarantee to us that you can research, you can get involved, you can work in a team, you can have an ability to write and report and analyze, particularly a science-based career. So as an example, our employment programs really look deep into the degrees that people entertain or have undertaken. We quite often will have a mandatory, yes, we want you to have a science degree, but in the end, the whole recruitment process doesn't take any reflection on that part at all. It's all about you. So I think many organisations are much the same. what they can see in you is ability to research, to write, to engage. And if you can do that, and what it does, it says your university experience is something that can add to that, whether it's technical or whether it's the more administrative part of it, is just another part of the process. So I wouldn't stop yourself from trying for anything with a science or environmental degree. You have the opportunity, the world's your oyster, go for it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, that's really interesting, and I think there's a bunch of things you mentioned that lead into our next question as well. So just touching on how you said it, it's also about you as a person. So what are also some skills that can help them get a career in this field? So, in like the science field, what are some skills like, got communication? Is there anything else that you can think of that is important for them to develop and have as a person?
Absolutely. I'll give an example of the criteria for our science grad program, as this is the recruitment criteria. The criteria starts with motivation. So, and maybe I'll go back a step and say the criteria needs to be demonstrated by whoever's applying. You need to be able to prove to whoever's reading an application in an assessment centre that you can justify, you can demonstrate what that criteria requires. So the things we would look for would be a motivation to do what we do. Working for government, integrity is a really big thing that we really need to understand, that somebody has a really good sense of integrity. Critical thinking and problem solving is something that we know that you've probably undertaken in your degrees, but to demonstrate it, you need to give us more than that. Innovation, continuous improvement, interpersonal skills is probably the primary thing that we're looking for, working collaboratively, which is teamwork, flexibility and accountability, adaptability. I'll go back on that. Flexibility and adaptability are two things that I think every employer now says, well, we just need to be flexible. We need to be able to adapt to a changing world. And then obviously communication, written, verbal, are high. They're the things that we recruit to. So we actually assess in our process. So they're the things that are at the top of our list when we want a grad to come to us and be able to say, I can provide evidence about all of these things that you're asking for.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, thank you. And I think a bunch of great points there. Interpersonal skills are definitely so important. So many great skills there. I think another question that we had was, you know, if they were to, once they get into that graduate position, let's say at Department of Environment, Land, Water, and Planning, what can they expect from that first year or 2 years as a graduate?
I'm a bit biased probably because I think the program's the best. And in fact, it's rated very high across graduate programs from the Australian Association of Graduate Employers. It's in the top 75. But what they would expect, okay, they'd expect engagement. We have a high priority on getting all our graduates together as often as possible. So, as an example, we have a 3-day induction, residential induction, where they get to meet all of the new grads plus the current grads that are in the program, because it's a 2-year program. They get to meet all their coordinating supervisors, first rotation supervisors, and work through all of the issues and requirements of the program during that induction. We then have 2 forums per year, which are 2-day forums overnight again, residential, where all the grads again get together, and there'll be, up to 30 grads and the graduate management team together working through what grads are doing. So new grads being told what second year grads have done in their first year to give them an understanding of what they might expect coming. and then a later one in the year where the first year grads turn around and give the second years an example of what they've been doing. And then there's a graduation for all graduating grads at the end of each year. As well as that, we have three formal L&D opportunities where grads meet again, usually residential, overnight for 3 days, where they get an undertaking of presentation skills, facilitation, and transition. And the transition is for the second year grads. All of the opportunities are maximised by offering that residential opportunity so grads can get together, socially engage, get to know each other, and really create a very tight-knit network. The benefits of that for grads into the future are they have people all around Victoria when all the grads finish that they know that they can count on, that they can go to for information. They're all working in different parts of the organisation. So unlike many employees who are in silos, our graduates have a full understanding of what the department does and has contacts everywhere. We also have an L&D budget for all graduates, which, as well as offering those components of facilitation, presentation skills, transition, the balance of a $7,500 budget we offer to them that they can do with what they wish. So after their first 6 months where they've been inducted and got to know the department, they then have an opportunity to use the balance of that $7,500 to do whatever development they feel is necessary for their future career. Okay. So as long as the graduate management team, they can justify to the graduate management team that what they want to do is in the best interests of a career in the department, we will allow them to go to conferences across Australia to do modules of uni degree, masters, to do any sort of courses, anything that they can say will help their development for a future career.
Awesome. That's really cool. So they've got a bunch of great opportunities there. They've got the L&D, and then they've also got that massive budget as well to upskill and advance their career as well. That's really cool. So were those the two main like training and resources that they get during their graduate time?
Well, the program is based on an learning and development program. So it's all about them learning as much as they can during those 2 years. They are given a buddy and a mentor to start with. So the buddy would come from the previous year's grad cohort, and the mentor is one of the senior people in the department that might like to help them. So other than official L&D, they get all of that. They also get a coordinating supervisor that oversees their 2-year program. They get obviously a manager at their 3 rotations, and the program is set up so that they get 3 rotations of about 8 months. Many of those rotations will be working and living in regional Victoria. So all of that brings its own learning and development process about how to cope with moving, how to cope with getting engaged in new communities. And we believe that all of those aspects allow our grads to be really fully rounded by the time they finish their program. And the program actually recruits to an ongoing position. It doesn't recruit to a grad role that when it's finished, you have to then find a job. It actually recruits to a grad position.
Awesome. Sounds like they're, getting very well set up. So what do you find like most grads who go through that position, that program, what kind of outcomes do they have from it? Is there like a certain amount of areas they can go into specialize or career paths that they can follow? Or what are the most common career paths that they might follow after that program?
I would say the evidence from our past grads have been they've gone and done, because we get them to rotate into 3 rotations that are generally fairly different, they get experience and a taste of a number of different opportunities. And I'd also like to say that grads quite often, while they're in those rotations, will go off and do things that are associated with the local area that might not be part of their rotation, but just they're offered opportunities. So by the time they finish, they've got a real feel for the sort of things that they want to do, that they're good at, they'd like to learn more about. So grads don't necessarily end up in the area that they've started in. They quite often have opportunities to go to all sorts of area. I mean, I had a look at our recruitment stats, and the levels that they might go into post the program probably had somewhere between 150 and 500 new roles created in the last financial year within the department. So those opportunities are there for them in the end of their graduate program. They can apply for and go into roles that would take them into their future.
Awesome.
That's not suggesting that
Mhm.
they won't have a role if they don't get one. The department will guarantee them a job at the end of their 2-year program. We just think that it's better for them to find the role they'd like and apply for and get it.
Mhm. Great. And what would you say career progression looks like long term? So let's say 10, 20 years down the track, what could they expect?
Oh, listen, our retention and progression stats are quite phenomenal for science and for VPS grads. We actually have science grads that are in the executive stream. We have science grads that are now in the most senior VPS programs, classifications. So the progression is really quite substantial for grads. I'm not going to say that a grad comes out of a program and will automatically jump 3 levels or 4 levels. And I don't think that's fair for a grad anyway. I think a grad, once they've got a real hold on what they want to do and where they want to go, it's up to them to actually, in that new role, gain the skills and confidence to take them to the next role. It's silly jumping a number of levels to because they can, and then find themselves out of their depth, and then it's frustrating. So we'd like to see them progress, and many actually move sideways to gain extra experience to get those higher level roles in the future.
Okay, awesome. So we did have a question in the comments, Gary. So we've got Des has asked, he said, I've just graduated with a Bachelor of Science honors. I'm currently deciding whether I want to get into a graduate position or do further studies, for example, a PhD or master's by research. So thanks, Des, for your question. And make sure if you have any more, just comment them so we can continue answering them for you. So Gary, what are your thoughts on that?
I have pretty strong thoughts on that one, Emily. But my thought is, if you're good enough to get into a program like ours, I can see little value in further education. My understanding of further education, that's to upskill you to get the job you want. If we can
Um,
if we can offer you that job now and provide you the sort of learning and development that will maximize your ability to get a greater depth of career in the area you're interested in, I think that's beneficial. I understand there will be some people who would like to do something like a PhD because they want to stay in that very research orientated role that quite often ends up back in universities. Certainly, that in-depth research role, we probably don't offer real careers in that anyway. So if you're looking just to do a master's or a honours degree solely to upskill yourself to get your role, I'd apply for a grad program and hope you get in. If you don't get in, certainly continue your honours or your masters.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank you for answering that. And yeah, if you guys have any more questions, just pop them in the comments and we'll make sure we answer them for you. Okay, so moving on to another question we have. Do you have any advice for grads on how they can stand out when they're applying for your organization?
Absolutely. History would say, and I've seen this every year, that grads, whether it be at application stage, interview stage, or assessment centre stage, probably don't prepare enough. They feel that they've done their study. What they've done is given them the skills and knowledge they'll need to get the job, and I can honestly say it doesn't. So my view would be, for those of you looking at jobs, go and find ways and evidence that you can provide to demonstrate all the things that I talked about before in relation to the criteria that organisations require to get a job. Now, when I talked about our organisation wanting interpersonal skills, things like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, flexibility, adaptability, motivation, can I tell you, having been on the committee of the Australian Association of Graduate Employers, that's what 90% of people recruiting graduates want. They're the things that they will recruit to. They're the things that they will have in their recruitment process. So take note of those and go away and think about how you could demonstrate to somebody and give them the confidence that what you're saying is true, that you can actually demonstrate that that is a part of your skill set, your evidence. Because what I've seen all too often is graduates at interview, even in applications, can't very quickly demonstrate the things that the employer has requested you comment on or you answer in a question. Far too often I see answers like, at university, I had to be really good at teamwork because of the projects we were involved in. There's nothing in there that tells me that that person is good at teamwork. There's no evidence. There's no, I was involved in this project, my role was, and the reason we had really good outcomes was because I did this, this, and this as a team member and provided evidence. The other thing that needs to be done is have examples that don't just relate to the university, to your projects, to your course. You need to have evidence from volunteering, part-time work, social networks, team sport, all sorts of things can provide those examples that will be far more realistic, because if you're looking at a graduate program, every graduate is coming from having done teamwork at university. And if you use that as an example, so will every other graduate. It doesn't set you aside. Whereas maybe if you play soccer and your role is this, and you've been involved in helping the team do a whole range of things and bring the team together, and your role is as a leader in the team, you can start talking about those things, how the team's progressing and how what you've done has helped the team win games or become more of a knit group. That would be far more convincing to somebody interviewing or being at an assessment centre than I led a project team at university, where we all know that nearly everybody gets to lead a project team at university. So really find the examples that you look at and say, if I was reading this, I could get a feel that this person really does have these sets of criteria that we need to get them into the job.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that some really great examples there. And yeah, just showing the difference between, a good answer and a bad answer as well. I think we just have one question from before in the comments. So I'll just address that quickly. So Vedant, so we have a construction, like a webinar on construction area coming up in about 2 weeks. So it's not really related to this webinar, but I will contact you and I'll send you the details for that one. And you can also apply for that webinar because that's probably going to be more aligned with, finding jobs in the construction industry. So I'll send that webinar information to you once I get off this webinar later on. Okay, awesome. So just making sure there's no more questions. Yeah, keep them coming, guys. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. Just off that, what we were talking about just before, had one question. What was it? Forgotten it, but I'll come back to it. Let me ask you a different one that I had. So the other one I had was, how can grads establish strong professional relationships with their supervisors and teams?
I think there has to be a real willingness to be open, to undertake. I think for a grad in particular, grads really want to achieve very quickly. There has to be an understanding that in many cases, their managers, their supervisors have a vast amount of work to do themselves. So a grad who is specific about what they need to do what they've been told, and gets in and gives it a go, is really beneficial to a manager and will create that really strong relationship that the supervisor then knows that I can give this graduate this work. They'll give it a go. If it doesn't work, they'll come back to me and say, this didn't work. I need to know more about this.
Awesome.
The issues quite often are where graduates go off and try and do everything and come up with the answer without some of the understanding of what the answer might need. So going beyond what their skill level allows them to do because they just want to do it, it's always good to touch base and make sure they're on the right track. And the other side of it is trying not to go back to the manager every 5 minutes to clarify, to make sure everything's right. So there's a real balance in there of take what you need, do what you can with the skills you've learned at university, and the all of the things that the manager will provide as tools that will allow them to do that work, and then find the things that they need to progress that work, and then take those things back. It really is getting that balance. So having a willingness to get that balance and an understanding that the managers are there to help you, but you aren't their only job. So I suppose they're the two things that if you understand that, you really can make that relationship really work.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And while you were answering that question, we did have some more questions come through. So I'll just go through those. So from Nanika, we have, hi, my name's Nana, currently studying a Bachelor of Science, majoring in marine biology. I'm in my final year and about to graduate in December this year. I've done some volunteering experience and an internship program to gain a sense of what working in a conservation organization looks like, because conservation is my dream job. And she said, like you mentioned before, there are a variety of job opportunities available, but it's hard to visualize and think about the potential career path that might be available for me. So do you have any thoughts on that one?
Certainly. An example is on our website, if you just type in DELWP graduate program, DELWP science graduate program, it should come up with it. It has a list of all of the jobs we will be recruiting to next year. So if you looked at all of those jobs and said, I'd really like to do that job, but my interest really is in marine or coastal activity, and it isn't one of those specific jobs, you might look at the other jobs and say, well, this one actually caters for areas and is in natural resource management, so there will be parts of that. This will get me into a department that actually do coastal management, and there will be jobs in the future that I could apply for. Those jobs are on our website now. They're all detailed. And our program for recruitment is open now. It opened on, I think, the 8th of July and goes through to the 8th of August. We then have, I think the next part is we'll assess those applications. We then go to a psychometric test, which is virtual online. We then have assessment centre, and following that is manager interviews. And those graduates that are successful will start in the end of January, start of February next year for a 2-year program. So in relation to a specific area you might really be passionate about, obviously, if there are organisations out there that have those, that's where I'd apply, because my view would be you will achieve the best if the role you get is where your passion lies, is where your values lie. So they're the jobs you should put the most work into. However, places like DELWP, particularly for environmental and conservation areas, is ideal. And we do have jobs that cover everything from catchments and waterways to biodiversity to natural resource management to planning to things like fire across Victoria. We are a major player in the work to do with wildfire across Victoria and burns. So many of our grads get involved in that emergency management work, which we encourage and they love. But other than that, yes, we do have people in our organisation that actually go out and look at whale strandings. So for somebody who's into marine, that's the sort of thing I would imagine that they would look towards to be a future career, and there are jobs in our department that would allow them to get to that role.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. We'll go on to the next one, which is from Chris. So Chris has just said, what industries are out there for environmental grads other than consulting, construction, government, and etc.?
I think environmental grads probably these days can work in most organisations. Most organisations have areas that define that as an organisation we need to be leaving the world in a better place than we are at the moment. So most organisations have that mandate as well. They want to improve their sustainability and their the way they deal with energy, the way they deal with waste, the way they deal with all sorts of things that conserve our environment. So most organisations will have roles like that. Very few government or very few graduate programs that allow for a learning and development program are around. I think most governments, state governments, have a environmental program or a science program. I think there are lots of local governments that employ people in this area, and obviously construction has to have that. I think most roles, they'd be there. It's identifying them, finding them, and obviously if you're looking at grad programs and you put in science or environment, you'll find those areas that are in recruiting graduates from that environmental science area.
Awesome. We also had Des, so he's also asked, as someone who's done research in computational chem, it's a little worrying that I won't be able to find a job in that particular field. How does someone be able to get into a niche field of work?
Yes, I'd suggest that if the work you want to do is very specific to the study and the research you've done, that study would provide you with the sort of workplaces that have that work. Obviously, there are places like Prospel that provide evidence of where you can go if you've got a particular skill set or area of study that you've undertaken. They have a website that will identify what is available in that area. So, I mean, they're the places that you go to. I'd have to say, though, from if you're not specifically interested in getting something very specific to your area, but you have an interest in, environment or conservation, computational chemistry would provide the background that would allow you to do a job in any area. You just have to be able to demonstrate that what you've done in that could add value to that job, to that grad program. Because as I've said before, we don't actually recruit to what graduates have actually done at university. We say that you need to have a science degree, but that's just part of our criteria. We don't actually test that in our recruitment process. We might at the very end where the manager has an interview and says, what can you add for us? But that's about it. So all you need to be able to do is demonstrate that what we do is what you would like to do and advise how what you've done at university can be used to help. And it might be as simple as I'm really good at using digital data to come up with explanations or resources or proposals based on some sort of science. Now, if you've done that at university, there's certainly places within our department that could use that. We actually use in fact, our grad program quite often uses spatial data experts to actually be able to map our biodiversity layers, our fire layers, our all sorts of layers of data that we need to do our work. So whatever degree you've done or post-grad work you've done, as long as you can say, there's parts of this that I could really adapt to this, and I'm really passionate about this area anyway, we would entertain you as an applicant.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for answering those. And continue asking questions, guys, if you have anything. So going back to questions we have, is there like a checklist of things that grads and students can assess to determine what's a right career path for them? Things that they can think about before deciding whether to go down a certain career path or, accept a position?
Yes, I think grads need to have a good hard look at themselves. I think they need to, firstly, the most important is to actually sit down and think about what their values are. Because values are things that are deep in ourselves. And if we're doing anything that doesn't align with our values, we won't do it well. So if I'm looking at a job, if I'm looking at somebody that wants a job with us, I'm looking at somebody who has the values that we have.
Mm.
So that would be my first thing. Look at your values. What makes you tick? What are the things that you've grown up with? What your parents have offered you? What do you really value in your life? Then I'd have a look at little things like, I did this at university. This was the course I did. This was the course that I wanted to do when I started it. Was it really, when I finished it, was it something that I still really wanted to do? Or did I find that it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do? So look at the things that you really would like to get involved in and look back in 20 years and say, gee, I'm glad I actually worked in this field. There are opportunities for everybody to actually go and do things in fields they may not have a real passion for. And it might be just to allow them to gain skills to get the job they want. And I would recommend, if somebody thinks they need that help, that they go and do that, whether it be volunteering, part-time jobs, all those sorts of things. You know, the number of graduates that don't see themselves as a long-term career in Coles or Woolworths, but go and stock shelves because they need money. The sort of skills they're getting from that are the sort of skills that every employer wants. It's actually, you know, working in a team to actually get something done for an organisation. It might be just filling shelves, but what have they done to say, I've improved that process because I suggested this, that, or the other? So all of those roles have the opportunity to give them something that will identify whether they want that job or whether they don't want that job. And they're the future careers that will be built on that. They know where they want to go, or they don't know where, or they don't know where they don't want to go. I don't. I'll let that go. That was all too hard. Yes, so they'll know where they want to go at the end of all of that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for that. So just thinking about back when we were talking about, making a graduate stand out and good answers, bad answers, was there a graduate you can think of in, maybe recently or a couple years ago that really stood out? And was there something in particular that made them stand out?
Well, there's been a number, Emily, of graduates that have stood out. And in fact, we get some really fantastic graduates, so a lot of them do. I think the things that make graduates stand out are the graduates that have actually done the research. If we took 80 odd graduates to an assessment centre and you get to talk to some of them, and there's those that you find out have applied for 30 roles, and those that that have, or you find out have only applied for 2 or 3 and have actually done their research with those organisations. They've actually really checked their websites, looked at areas that they would be interested in those organisations through their websites, looked at what projects, the areas that they're interested in are doing, what the outcomes will be, why they're trying to do those things, what the work is involved. And most websites provide all of that. But the number of grads that actually come to an interview or an assessment centre and can actually start talking about, I looked at your website, the area that I'm interested in is this. I know that they're undertaking these research projects. I know that they're looking to have an outcome that will be like this. I know that the future will mean that they'll be doing these things. This is an area I really am interested in and would want to be involved in. And I've done some work in this that will allow me to provide this sort of help to get there. I mean, that talks about motivation. It talks about using your being innovative, problem solving. That just answers half the things that we're looking for in a interview. So one is research. Pick the jobs that really make a difference and put your time into those. I don't think going for a huge amount of jobs helps because you can't put your time into all of those jobs. So if you can't put your time in, don't bother. I also think that making sure that the organisation that you're applying for knows you. So finding out who the graduate team is, getting in touch with them, what things that might be interested in, looking at the roles that have been offered, trying to find out who the managers are, and maybe trying to get some contact with them to get some further information about stuff is all really evidence that you're motivated for that job. So they're the things that I'd be interested in, and they're the things that stand out with grads that have come and been successful. The other thing is, don't be afraid to actually say, I'd like to just think about this for a moment, rather than just burst straight into what comes into your mind first. Because what comes into your mind first isn't always the best thing that's in your mind. Quite often what we look for is that best demonstrated ability of whatever we're looking for. And sometimes grads might have 3 or 4 examples that they could use, and one will be the first one into their head, but it might not be their best. So one, prepare all of the criteria that I've said, have good examples of all of those, not just one, but many. Think about them often so they're in your mind. And the grads that have really done well have been the ones that have actually thought about it and come up with a really good example of why they could undertake or answer that question that provides us with a real demonstration of their ability or skill.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on, thinking about your answers, which I think is a really great, valid point. But I think we should flip that question. So, what if they were to, spit out an answer and they weren't quite happy with it? Do you have a tip on how they can backtrack or, fix up what was starting to be, a bad answer to a question?
Absolutely. I've also seen too many people find a bad answer and then just try to continue with it because they've started it. People who are talking to you at an interview want you to achieve. They don't want to have you. And in fact, our department is really proactive in being positive at interviews. We don't want to make it difficult for people to get the best out of them. So we don't make it difficult. We make it as easy as possible. So what we want to do is make it easy. So if somebody's feeling uncomfortable with the answer that they've got, we would far rather them turn around and say, can I start that again? Because I think I've got a better answer.
Mhm.
Now, to an interviewer, that would say, this person's actually reflected on something and made a decision because they know they were wrong. And I would be saying to interviewers and graduates, nobody is always 100% right. And we have to accept that we learn from our mistakes, and people that are willing to acknowledge their mistakes and fix them are the sort of people we would like.
Mhm.
So it comes across as nearly a positive attribute. So don't stick yourself with something that you've started and you just think, let's just get over this and mumble your way through and make a mess of it. Just say, excuse me, I think I've got a better example or something that better demonstrates what I'm trying to say. Is it okay if I close that down and start something else? Excuse me.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Garry. So we are getting to, the last 9-10 minutes or so of the webinar. So guys, make sure if you have any final questions for Garry to pop them in the comments. But I think to sort of wrap it up a little bit, I'd love to hear just any final advice or any final, anything you want to share with the grads to also wrap up your, your retirement as well, Garry. Anything that you've learned from all these years working in the industry? What would you like to pass on? What advice would you like to pass on to grads?
I think particularly in this science and environmental stream is that we have a responsibility for Victoria and the planet. What we need is passionate, dedicated people who want to make a difference. They're the people that we want in our program. And I'd really like to encourage everybody to think about what they want to do in their career. Look at the things that make them really, passionate, motivated. They're the things you want to go for. Do your research. Don't think that what you've done at uni or anything else is going to get you there. I used to say to many university students at presentations, you need to start planning early. So for many of you, it's possibly too late. But if some of you out there are in year 2, 3, and you're not graduating and going into programs now, you have the opportunity to start identifying things that you can use as examples now. Write them down. Look at them every now and again. You know the sort of things that we're looking for because every organisation is looking for the same things. You just look up on, the different grad programs, look up Prosper or Grad Australia, and they will tell you what graduate employers are looking for in their grads, what things they're assessing against. And spend time in identifying things that you can use as examples that will make somebody on the other side of a table feel, I'm confident this person can do that. That'll make the difference, because if you don't do that, you won't get the job. There you go. It's really quite simple. And I mean, it's a hard world out there now. There's lots of grads and the jobs aren't, limitless. So you've got to put the work in. University is one part of it, but in the end, it's what you have done in your life that makes the difference. And your passion and your ability to identify things that can help you get there. So get that notebook or that iPad or whatever it is that you write your things in, and write out examples of every one of those criteria and look at them regularly to put them in your brain. Because one thing I can tell you is that when you have 3 people the other side of a table and they're asking you questions about your future, that's your future, it's your career. If you get the job, the first thing that pops into your head isn't always the right one. And I've seen far too many people under the strain of those interviews or assessment centres just go blank too. And usually you go blank because you haven't done the work before to remind yourself of all of the things you need to know. And the more often you go through those tips, those examples that you've written down or got in your brain somewhere, the more times you look at those and say, yes, teamwork, this is one for that, this is one for that, this is one for that, this is a really good one for that in this situation, this is a good one for that in this situation, and have them all in your brain and reflect on them regularly, what happens at an interview is your brain will go, that one, because you've done the work. And if you don't do the work, it won't pop out when you want it to. So that's my recommendation. Research, do the work, and good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Garry. So Thanks so much for all your insights and whatnot today. It's been super valuable, and I can see from the comments that we've managed to answer a bunch of questions. And Des also just left a comment just before saying, thank you. There's a bunch of considerations that they have to make now about where they want to go and exploring new ventures. So it's been super beneficial, and thanks so much for doing this before heading off to your retirement. So it's such a great way to pass on all your knowledge in the industry for the past years or so to these students. So it's very valuable. So just before we wrap up, I will just go through some things. So if you guys are interested in checking out the job opportunities at DELWP, there is a bunch of, so there's a program open right now. You can head to gradaustralia.com.au, just search up the name, and then you'll be able to see the program. You can see kind of the timeline, the structure, the interview process. You can read a bunch of grad stories as well to see how they found it. And make sure that if you guys want to tune into any of our future sessions as well, just keep an eye on our socials. We have basically 2 webinars a week for the next 2 months. So there's a bunch of things going out. They may not necessarily be for your area of interest, but they certainly might be for, someone else you know. So if you know anyone in nursing or midwifery, we have one next week in that area. So just keep an eye out on our socials and share it with anyone else who you think might find it useful, because these are such great ways to really get to ask people in the industry who have a lot of experience about, any questions you may have. So before we end that session, I just wanted to let you guys know that feel free to connect with myself on LinkedIn, or Garry as well if you want to reach out, ask any questions. More than happy to answer anything. If anyone needs any assistance with job applications or finding the career page of DELWP as well. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. So hope you guys all enjoyed the webinar and got a bunch out of it. If you want to rewatch this, if you missed anything, you can just head to our YouTube, or it's on LinkedIn, Facebook. So it's on 3 platforms, so you can't miss it. So make sure you stay tuned for our socials as well to see all the upcoming events we have. And thank you so much. And thanks to Garry again for joining.
Good luck.
Awesome. Okay. Bye, guys.
Cheers.